The world may evolve from present circumstances after the severe global economic crisis to emerge much different than before the financial meltdown started. Reverend Jesse Jackson, who was once a presidential nominee for the Democrats in America, said there is now a need for the world to move toward a new economic model in which he seemed to advocate a fine mix, blending the strengths of capitalism peppered with some elements of socialism. He felt that the present world order had a lack of vision and is filled with greed and corruption. In his lecture in Kuala Lumpur on Wednesday night, he added the notion that markets would automatically correct itself is now faulty after the subprime crisis.
The result is together with short-term pleasure and long-term pain. Our banks fought against any measure of regulation. They said they could be self-correcting and they could be self-critical and they could be self-correcting. And that's like having a world soccer match without referees, without umpires, that you can be self-correcting. On our best day, we need to do our best. We need good referees. We need good umpires. What makes an economy work is checks and balances. What makes it work is accountability. Absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. So we had the energy speculators, the energy price went up for no good reason, just manipulating paper and making money off of money. And then the banks, without regulations, began to invest and lend beyond any material foundation. And then you have the housing foreclosure crisis, manipulating homes and with adjusted rate mortgage, taking advantage of people. And then the areas of fraud was walked away from. There were no gatekeepers in the issue of fraud. And then with all of that, stealing and corruption.
Jesse also said the Fed's stimulus plan to inject money into the financial system was done too hastily, explaining that the banks were propped up to do the same old things in the same way, only perpetuating chronic problems inherent in the financial system today. He explained that the current system needed improvement to include more checks and balances for banks to be more accountable on how they lend money.
A guaranteed debt and not a guaranteed job. We need to be blessed, to thank God for being blessed with a new president. We also need new direction, new priorities, because in this world, new possibilities. Well, the brink of disaster, none of us be on the brink of peace and development. We need each other. Both of us have what the other one of us need.
He suggested that banking should be done in a new way, advocating for more social responsibility when making profits.
The banking crisis shifts the balance of the world. Almost $3 trillion of the estimated $4 trillion recent economic losses stem from bad loans and toxic assets from the U.S. There's somebody to make money off of that toxicity. And for those who did it, they must pay a price for jeopardizing the economies of the world. Perhaps it's time, rather than just prop up old, collapsed banks, to create new banks, a new banking system, banks that are accountable, banks that are manageable, banks that can be overseen, banks that are targeted for urban development, research and development, or youth development.
He also said retreating into trade barriers is not a way out of this mess, advocating not just for more free but fair trade. Meanwhile, the civil rights activist also added that talents from the third world should not be marginalized but be given equal opportunities on par with developed nations, adding later that people should be recognized for their talents and not their social status. Behind me is the Petronas Twin Towers, which is a sign of the success of capitalism in this country, Malaysia. Only time will prove if the ideal world envisaged by Reverend Jesse Jackson will become a reality in our lifetimes. I'm Daniel Koo reporting for the HTV.